Hello and welcome to Modern App Dev with Oracle REST Data Services. I'm Brian Spinellini and I'm a product manager here at Oracle and the Database Development Tools organization. Today we're going to talk about modern application development with Oracle REST Data Services and how you can use it and utilize it for your modern application development. So I said modern application development a few times. What does that actually mean for us? What it means is in the last probably 5, 6, 7 years, we've seen a shift from legacy application development environments to these new framework environments, Node.js, Python, some of the scripting environments that we have. And with that, we find that developers tend to abstract the two layers of the data layer and the application layer. Now, I guess that's been done in the past, but now it's even more apparent. And what's happening is we see that some of these developers are turning into DBAs themselves. They have to manage and load and get that data in there and deal with it. And the problems they're having is that, these databases may speak different languages. They may not know how to write SQL or understand SQL. And then these frameworks want this data in a certain format. So how do we accommodate that? And how does the Oracle database accommodate that? And what products and tools do we have to help with that? We've also seen a move to CI/CD pipelines, the continuous integration, continuous development, very fast processes to get to the production, to get to development environments. And how do we fit in with that? So again, having an agile serverless environment that leads to being able to create these applications very quickly, shorten the timelines, and be able to do this securely and with accountability. Having that accountability of who's checking in the code, who's doing the code, and to make sure that we don't have someone trying to put code in there that shouldn't be in there. So what does Oracle have to help with this application development time frame or timeline that we have from having that data, getting it into the database, choosing a framework, and then exposing that data to the framework so that people can utilize it in their applications? As we said, there's a bunch of different types of application environments out there. We see, as I said, Node.js is very important, very popular. React, another JavaScript framework. Python is a very popular scripting language that we're seeing. Multiple different browsers. And then we have our mobile development environment, Xcode or Android SDK. So we have this database that usually speaks SQL. So how do we tell all these environments, whatever framework we choose, and how do we unify it so that we're basically returning a language that they all understand and we're utilizing that database in the best way possible? So in the Oracle Database Development Tools organization, we're responsible for 5 main tooling sets. The first thing is SQL Developer. And SQL Developer is a very, very popular tool. There's about 7-8 million installations or people using it today all over the world. It's for working with your database. It's a free tool. In fact, everything on here is a free tool that we provide. The development tool organization, everything that we have comes out of us is free. But SQL Developer is that tool, that de facto tool for working with your Oracle database. Next, we have Data Modeler. And with Data Modeler, what we're doing is we are able to make these diagrams of how your tables and your data models are relational to each other. And then we can take that, spit it out, and apply it into our database very easily. On the very far right of the page, we have Oracle REST Data Services, which we'll be talking a lot about today. And that, in essence, REST enables your database, your Oracle database. And on the bottom left, we have SQL CL, which is our new command line interface into the database. It's like SQL Plus, but it's a lighter weight command line tool for running SQL. And it also is expanded to work in our cloud. So we have many extensions for using it with OCI, whether it's the object store or security or what have you. All these things are built into that tool. And then lastly is Database Actions. And this is a suite of web-based products, which we're going to see and talk about today, that are able to be installed or placed atop your databases on premise, or they come out of the box with any of the autonomous database flavors. So let's just jump right in here and talk about Oracle REST Data Services and what it can do. So the big draw of Oracle REST Data Services is that REST enables your Oracle database. And so what does that mean? Well, it allows you to create a secure HTTPS connection into your database and be able to expose via the return would be JSON, your data in your database, whether it's tables or views or custom SQL or PL SQL business logic, whether it's packages or functions or procedures, we're able to expose that with Oracle REST data services. And we do it in a secure manner where we can talk either username, password to log in via header authentication, or we can use OAuth2, a token exchange, to interact with these REST services and then expose them to the client, whether the client is, as we said before, that the Node.js or the React or the Python or the whatever Xcode, whatever application the language you're developing in, we're going to return JSON, which you're going to easily be able to take apart, use, and display or utilize within your application. One of the big things with ORDS is that we define everything at a schema level. We're not database wide. If you install ORDS on your database, we don't open your entire database up and expose every single piece of data or table in it. You control at a very granular level what tables or objects or functions or procedures are actually able to be REST enabled via our UI or via the APIs. And again, as I said, UI API, we provide full development support. So we have a CLI to interact with Oracle REST Data Service. We have a UI via database actions. You can use SQL Developer on premises, multiple ways to work with these REST services, create them and expose them. We also have SOTA for REST, which basically allows us to work with JSON documents as we see with many of the document stored databases out there. So the Oracle database can act just like any other of, as I said, the JSON document stored databases via these SOTA for REST APIs. So loading data, exposing data, getting data out. We can all do that with the SOTA for REST APIs that come included with Oracle REST Data Services. And we'll talk a little bit that at the end, because we do have an upcoming workshop that works directly with JSON in the database as a Oracle developer or just an application developer. We see that microservices are huge, especially with this new modern application development. So Oracle REST Data Services is able to help you with in creating microservices on your database. So we see that with 12.1, we introduced the pluggable database or the multi-tenancy model with Oracle, where you have a single CDB and multiple pluggable databases within that CDB. So we can take Oracle REST Data Services and place that on top or in front of these pluggable databases. So each one of those pluggable databases can be a microservice. A little bit more on that as well. And then lastly, we have a whole suite of management APIs on top of the databases when you install Oracle REST Data Services. So whether it's managing and monitoring your database or working with your database, those are installed automatically with Oracle REST Data Services when you go ahead and install it. Whether, again, as I said, you can do it on premises or you can have it immediately come with any of the autonomous databases that we have in our cloud, which would be the ATP or the transaction processing one, our data warehouse one, our JSON one, and our new Apex one. Each one of those has Oracle REST data services on the front for it, so you can utilize it in any way. So let's really touch on microservices, because again, microservices are getting very big. They're very popular. Depending on who you talk to, some people are like, we tried microservices, we want to go back to macro services, where some people are kind of splitting the middle with this and having a little bit of microservices and a little bit of the legacy monolith services. But with Oracle REST Data Service, we are able to have these microservices placed upon your database. And I touched about a little bit with the multi-tenancy. And you can see in the picture here, we have these three databases, maybe an airline reservation service, hotel reservation services, and then events booking. Each one of these applications or each one of these pieces or type of data can live within these databases. And as we see here, one of the databases could be a JSON document store using Oracle. One of the databases can be straight relational. The other one could be a key value pair or a NoSQL type database. We can store any type of database within, or any type of data within the Oracle database. And then what we do is we have the Oracle REST Data Services on top of that, and we expose the business logic or the table or the data, whatever format it is, out to our client applications. And we can do this in small microservices, or we can do it across an entire database. It all depends on how you want to deploy this. But Oracle REST Data Services does allow you to enable this microservices layer with the pluggable database paradigm, or you can have microservices on, say, schema. You have schema 1 that is the airline, schema 2, which is the hotel, and maybe schema 3, which is the booking events. And then you could have microservices into each one of those schemas. Pluses and minuses in either way, but know that it is available with the Oracle database. And the most important thing here to remember, though, is not only of the microservices, but that the data in the databases can be in multiple structures, I should say. So again, we have the ability to store that data in that document, that JSON document model, and expose and take those data in, as well as a relational or the key value pair. It doesn't matter. We can have it with the Oracle Converged database. Now let's get into the database actions. And again, this is something that if you use the autonomous database you get out of the box, or if you have an on-premise database, when you install Oracle REST Data Service, it's going to ask you, hey, do you want us to install the database actions on top of here? And you say yes, and we go ahead and we install it, and you're able to get to it immediately. And it starts with SQL Developer. Again, SQL Developer, everyone loves SQL Developer. We put it in the browser now. So we have the ability to use SQL Developer straight in the browser. We've had a lot of great functionality that we're putting into it, and we're adding more and more every quarter. But that is available directly with the database action. So again, running SQL statements, running SQL scripts, looking at your objects, utilizing your object, editing your PL SQL, all that is available with SQL Developer in the UI, or I should say with database actions on the web. We also have the ability to monitor and manage your database. We have a lot of developers that ask us, hey, we're kind of taking on this DBA role. What do you have in the way of cool metrics and monitoring charts and graphs that would show us how our database is working? Or if we have SQL that is bad or we need to tune it, is there a way that we can see this? And we do have that. We have Instance Viewer or Performance Hub right within database actions, so you can see how your database is doing, what's going on, and are your queries and what's happening, are they running optimally, and how to fix them. We've brought in data modelers, so schema diagramming is directly in our database actions as well. As I said, we have the ability to use that JSON document store. So working with your JSON documents in a QBE type of manner, we have that UI on our database actions as well. And then lastly, user management. So being able to manage your users in a graphical user interface, adding users, removing users, giving them roles, giving them quota, all those are available via the database actions. And then lastly, as I said, this is available anywhere you have an Oracle database. If it's an autonomous database, it's available. If it's an on-premise database, it's available. If you installed your database in OCI and Oracle Cloud Infrastructure on an infrastructure instance, you can go and just type yum install orgs, and it's going to grab it from our yum repository, install it, and you're ready to go. So it's pretty much everywhere that obviously the Oracle database is. Now, next, let's talk about importing files. So again, as a developer, I have this data. How do I get it into my database? Well, using that SQL Developer for the web UI, the SQL interface, you're able to drag and drop files directly onto the UI and load them into the database with an import wizard. Now, this wizard is going to ask you, do you want to load this into an existing table, or do you want to create a new table? And if you want to create a new table, it's going to create that table for you, load that data in there, and you're ready to go. And another neat feature we have there is we're able to look at that table in the UI and auto REST enable it. So basically saying, I want to REST enable this table. And what that's going to do for you behind the scenes is going to put a bunch of REST APIs onto this table. So it's going to give you an insert API. It's going to give you a batch load API. It's going to give you an update API. It's going to give you a delete API. And it's going to give you a query API automatically for you directly by just saying, enable this table. So we can actually see this in action with this quick little demo here. So let me just bring up my UI here for SQL Developer database action. So here we have it right here. And what I can do is I can actually load data directly on here through this. So let me just go and grab a file, and I can just drag it on here. Now this file that I'm adding here, this file was, you're going to, if you continue on and to use our lab or follow along with the hands-on lab, this is some of the data you'll be working with. Now, this is actually a JSON file, and you see that we've actually normalized some of it, and then some of it has embedded JSON. So this is a neat way you can have relational data, using relational data and JSON data all within the Oracle database, or as I said before, you can go straight document store as and use it as you would a document store database as they're out there. So this is, giving us a preview of the data. It's going to give you my table definition and name my table, and we can see that it knows this is JSON, so it's going to store it in the database as JSON. And then all we have to do is hit next, and there it is. There's our table. It's going to give us just some information about it, the DDL, so if we need to just copy and paste this, or if you want to let it run, and we'll just hit finish. And what this is going to do is going to go ahead and it's going to load that data into the database. And after that's done, it's going to give us this table, and the table will be created. And you can see the table is created right here. So as I said before, we can REST enable this table very easily with the auto REST feature. So all I have to do is right click on this and hit REST. And I said, hit enable. And we saw in the background actually there, if you look at the bottom, you'll see that it just loaded 4,400 rows into the database very, very quickly. And as note, this is basically what I'm using here is an always free instance. So it's not even a full CPU and doesn't have the full gigabyte of memory. It's the always free one. So I think it's a little bit less. It's like a half a CPU. So you saw that the SQL web sheet here does it very, very fast, and ORDS is powering all this behind the scenes. And then again, I hit enable. It's going to say, is this what you want? Yep. And I can actually just grab this URL here, and we'll just copy this, and we'll say enable. And this is going to REST enable our table. And if I want to see it, there's a couple ways I can do it. I can go back here and do REST and see CURL commands. And it's going to give me all the commands I need for this. So here's the get all command. Here's the get single, post, batch load. So I can batch load documents directly into this table via this CURL command it's giving me, a put and a delete. As I said before, I can probably just go in here and grab that URL it gave me, and it's going to basically give me the data in the table here. And there it is. Here's all that data in the table. We have it normalized as well as in the JSON arrays for us to use. So again, you can get the idea that we would expose this out, via to an application, whatever language it is, but it's being returned in JSON. If I just go to raw data, you'll see that it is a JSON doc that is coming back. So again, we'll take that relational data in the database, whether it's JSON or not, or what have you, and we'll expose it out via Oracle REST data services very easily and very quickly from this awesome, database actions that we actually call it auto REST option right here. So very, very cool feature we have directly in here. Let's just go back to the slides now. All right, so we saw importing files with database actions. And again, we can do CSV, comma delimited, Excel files, JSON, as well as Avro files. All these can be put into the database via that drag and drop UI, very easy to use. Now we touched upon batch loading, but let me talk a little bit more about batch loading. So what we can do with the batch load API is we can load millions of rows into the database in seconds. And whether it's going to be JSON docs or whether it's going to be a CSV file, it doesn't matter. We can do both. In fact, in the lab that we have after this, we go through doing this, and we actually provide you a CSV file with over 2 million rows. And what you'll do is you'll go through the process of creating this table and using these batch load API to directly load that 2 million row file directly into the table. And it takes approximately 20 to 30 seconds to do the entire 2 million rows. Very, very fast, but it's going to give you experience of doing it. And again, this API, this batch load API can be, you can have security on it with either a header authentication or via OAuth 2 client, and then utilize this for maybe an application that is an Internet of Things application that has lots and lots of rows that needs to load this data in very fast and very quickly. This is the API that you would use instead of doing a row at a time. We have that batch row API. So again, Internet of Things is a great use case for the batch load API. And again, it's all done via REST and all done using Oracle REST data services. So we've been talking about a lot about these REST services. How do we create them? Again, we saw that we could create them via that auto rest. I left click, I auto rest enable a table, and I'm done. I have all these great APIs, these REST APIs on top of my my table. But what if I want to use custom SQL? What if I want to expose this business logic? And again, you'll be doing this in the lab. We'll talk about that in a minute. But via the UI, the same UI that we just saw, we can go into the REST module and we can build these REST services with absolutely almost zero code. It's a very low code environment. I can go in there. We saw that there's no code for the auto rest, but there's very low code, and all I need to know is a select statement. So we see here in this picture here on the slide that we're just doing a select star from this table where column equals :ID, and that's actually a variable that we can pass in via the REST API and get back all the data that's related to that particular ID. So we can pass in variables directly into the REST services we use and then get that JSON answer back with it. Again, it's very easy to use in the point and click interface. It takes you literally probably about 60 seconds to create a secured REST API that either queries the table, works on business logic, or does an insert. Very, very easy to do. Very, very quickly. And again, it's a very low code environment. Anyone can do it. So we basically have helped our developers who may not be familiar with the SQL language, who may not have a lot of SQL knowledge, be able to go into Oracle REST Data Services, our database actions, and quickly create these interfaces for exposing data to their application framework of choice. Another thing we have here is we have database management APIs. I touched upon this in the beginning of the presentation. Now, the great thing about the database management APIs is we support a whole range of database, 19, 18, 12, 1, 12, 2, 11, and we also, with our latest release, we support database 21C. 21C is only available right now in the cloud on the Autonomous Database, but it does support 21C. And we give you a whole catalog of APIs that you can use against the database for, as we have here, for general APIs, looking at the data dictionary, monitoring, reporting, performance, and PDB lifecycle management. That's a big one because you can use these database APIs to create, delete, clone, do all sorts of work with pluggable databases. So if you're in, for example, a CI/CD environment and you need to quickly spin up a clone of a database and use that for testing your code in a pipeline, we can do this very quickly via these REST APIs. And again, there's no code, you just enable it and you use it and you're ready to go. We've seen a lot of customers use this for Grafana dashboards. So they expose out the monitoring and performance aspects and reports of the database via these REST APIs, and they hook them up into a Grafana dashboard. And then they have a one-stop dashboard where they can see exactly how the database is running, how it's working, and they can combine different databases within there. All they have to do is use these REST APIs upon the pluggable database or the database that they're using, and then combine them all into a single dashboard. So we had built a dashboard in the past that shows all the health of how pluggable databases are working. So are the databases open? Are they closed? Are they mounted? And how they're doing and all the health upon them. And then we can also expose things such as the alert logs or some things about how the database health is going to make sure there are no OR errors in the alert logs and then have alerts and monitoring on them. So a large breadth of things you can do by just, again, putting Oracle REST Data Services on your existing databases and exposing these database management APIs to a host of reporting and application platforms. So what's this lab that we have coming up next, and what are we going to do in it? So this modern app dev with Oracle REST Data Services, LiveLab, is going to walk through a lot of the stuff that we talked about today. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to get a free service and you're going to create an autonomous database with it. Okay, got the autonomous database ready. And then you're going to connect in to the autonomous database to the SQL Developer web using database actions. And at that point, you're pretty much set up, ready to go. So in Lab 3, you're going to create a user. Again, using those interfaces that we saw in database actions, you're going to go create a user, provide a password, give them a role, and give them quota upon a table space for them to create tables and load data. Very easy. Again, click, 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 and you're done. No code whatsoever. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to create an auto rest enable a table. So we're going to take a CSV file, drag and drop it onto the UI, and make a table from that. And then as we saw in that quick demo, we're going to left click on that table and we're going to auto REST enable it. And we'll have all the APIs available for us to use. Okay, now that we have that done, we have the user created, we have the table created. Now we're going to batch load a bunch of data into the table. So that's where we're going to take that 2 million row CSV file and hit that batch load API and load it all in seconds. We're going to do this all through the CURL commands, and you're going to do it to your autonomous database very easily. And then we're going to create some business logic. There's a very easy procedure that we have in there that you just copy and paste and put it in your database. And we're going to set that up and ready to REST enable it. So that would act as, for example, a business logic point. So this would be business logic that you had in your database that you wanted to expose to an application. All right, so now that we have that, we're going to go in there and we're going to create some custom REST enabled services on these two things. So we know we had the auto REST, and the auto REST did all those get, put, delete, insert, and a batch load. We're going to create two new REST services. One that is going to take in a variable, so we can take in a variable and get a custom report back. And then the second one is we're going to actually wrap that business logic in a REST API and then work with that REST API to feed that procedure a value, and then it will return a value back to us, all using JSON and CURL commands. And again, you can kind of think of how you would use that in your application development. So you'd have your framework you choose, and you would interact with these REST services with that framework doing very similar things. And then lastly, we're going to secure these REST endpoints. So we're going to use them. We're going to create an OAuth 2 client. We're going to create tokens, and we're going to actually see the exchange of tokens from a client to that REST service, accepting it, and then returning that data to us from that REST services that we created. All right, so what are my next steps here? What are we going to do? As I said before, we have that lab coming up right after this, and that's that Modern App Dev Lab. We're going to do all the things that we just talked about in that previous slide. Next week, we actually have a lab that we have in our LiveLabs folder, or I should say our collection of labs from the database development group, that is called the Choose Your Own JSON Adventure. You'll find a recording of that on YouTube, and as well as you'll find the lab in the LiveLabs application. But this basically allows you to work with JSON in a relational and a document store method. So what we have is we have a really big JSON file, the one that we loaded in with that demo, that we're going to load in via the UI and work with it in a relational manner and use the JSON functions that SQL gives you. And then we're going to load it in via the SOTA APIs and work with it as you would a document store database, and show the advantages of having that, the ACID transactions to make sure that we're not eventual consistent and data over here is updating and data is not there, and all those things we're going to work on in this lab. And go ahead and take a look at that. That should be up by now. If you have any questions about anything you saw, again, going to oracle.com/rest. Very easy. All the tools we have there, all of our products are on that page, as well as you can download any of them there for free and use them on premises or in the cloud. We have a database dev tools folder on GitHub. And in this folder, we have examples. We have CI/CD pipelines. We have Terraform scripts, a bunch of stuff in there for developers to help them get up and running very quickly. We have a database dev tool Discord server. So we have about 100 people on there, and that's a great place that we invite people to come to talk about their database development tools experience. So they talk about their database dev tools experience there, and they're able to ask questions. Now, it's not a support forum, but it's a place to just bounce ideas off. Or if you're kind of having a problem, maybe how do I write this SQL, or how do I REST enable this, or how do I use these tools? We jump in there. The product managers are on that Discord server, and we're watching questions and we try to answer it, as well as the community. The community is always jumping in and answering questions on there as well. We also like to use that for new product and new webcast announcements. So if you're interested in new product announcements or new webcasts that are coming up, you can join that Discord server and see what's going on there. And lastly, we have our Twitter accounts. We have myself at BTSpendo. And then lastly, we have our other product manager, Jeff Smith at Jeff Smith. Jeff Smith has a great blog at thatjeffsmith.com. He blogs about all of our tools and all of our products on there, as well as gives samples and examples on how to use them and how to utilize them in your development flows. So next we have our Q&A. So let's see if there are any questions within the Q&A here. So let me bring that up real quick. So the first question is, let me bring up, here it is. First question is, can Oracle REST data services be used on premise databases as well? Yes, we talked about that earlier, but definitely Oracle REST data services can be used anywhere you have an Oracle database. It's a very easy install. You download it from, you can download it from oracle.com. You can, again, as I said before, you can grab it from the Git repository in OCI, or it just comes with the autonomous database. It's a very, very quick install. It's a very, very small install, but it can be used on any Oracle database in the cloud or on premises. All right. Can we use REST data service to use SOTA for interacting with JSON documents? Yes, we have that lab that we have upcoming. So we basically have the ability to use these SOTA APIs for interacting with JSON documents via Oracle REST data services. And then, as I said, we have a UI in database actions for working directly with these documents. That LiveLab that we have there, that choose your own JSON adventure, has a whole section on there that we utilize and walks through using that JSON document store UI, running some QBEs and working with that huge JSON file that we put in there. And you're able to see how it works and see how it runs, and then utilize or conceptualize how you can use this in your own application development. Again, it works just as in any other document store database would, but it gains all the advantages of what the Oracle database brings to the table, especially if you're running it in the cloud on autonomous database, which is running on an Exadata, and you have all the advantages of running on an Exadata for your JSON document store database. Let's see. We'll take one more question because I think we're running out of time here. What database versions does ORD support? As you saw before, ORDs can be installed on databases from 11GR2 all the way to 21C and everything in between. So 11GR2, 12.1, 12.2, 18C, 19C, and 21C. It can be installed on any of those database types. Now, granted, some features may not be available on all of them because as the database goes on, we put new features in there, but ORDs can be installed and be used on any of those database versions.